switch to plane mode.
Thanks.
1, 2.
Allie, how you feeling? We were just talking about you. Recovered? Have you recovered? Awesome. Cool. Apparently 20 people got hit at F London. Must be there. If all those people got it. Wow.
So the answers.
Can you move closer?
Up to you, but the answers you have to say will appear on the screen. No?
The answers to your questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we move forward? Hi, Joseph.
Shall we get started? Shall we get started?
Let's do it.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Lubin.
Hello, everyone. Hey, Jerome.
So first off, I'd like to do a quick introduction of Joe Lubin, and maybe you can do an introduction of Consensus after. Had the honor to work with this gentleman for the past 3 years. And I'm very proud that this year he managed to come to HCC. So we have 2 Ethereum founders in the conference this year. And when I get asked who is Joe Lubin and what is his story, the answer I usually give is Joe Lubin studied robotics in the 80s. He then worked at Goldman Sachs in the 90s, mainly doing investment in tech. And he got out of the dot-com bubble with champagne. He settled in Jamaica in the year 2000, where he got back into business by achieving quasi-monopolistic position in the North America for reggae music production. And eventually he learned about Bitcoin in 2010, and he loved the tech. And soon after this, he met Vitalik Buterin on a trip to Canada. At this time, the Ethereum blockchain was merely a white paper. And he immediately thought that it was the next big thing. And soon after, he founded Consensus in 2014. And then we had the launch of the Ethereum mainnet in July 2015. And I think the rest is history. So first question, how accurate is this story?
Accurate. You found 1 or 2 facts and wove a narrative fiction around it. So see if I can deconstruct it. So in the 90s, so I graduated as an electrical engineering computer scientist in '87. In the 90s, I was doing about 10 years of robotics, machine vision, neural nets research. I never drank any dot-com champagne. I was just more nerdy and wasn't doing the e-commerce dot-com stuff. I worked at Goldman for a little while, early 2000s or early noughts, and then ended up in the so I was more on the IT side, but then ended up in the world of finance, building trading systems, and ran a hedge fund. And I did live in Jamaica, but I did not monopolistically dominate the reggae music scene. I was hanging out with a friend and helped her attempt to launch a music career. And got involved just obsessively reading about everything in blockchain in very early 2011. And then was lucky enough to meet Vitalik on, we established it was January 1st. We were talking about this on stage last week in London. It was January 1st, 2014. Met Vitalik about a month after he wrote the white paper describing the Ethereum platform, and I and a whole bunch of people started trying to organize the Ethereum project roughly around Vitalik, and launched it about a month later. A year after that, started Consensus to try to build decentralized applications on this new platform that wasn't quite released yet, and turned out it was really hard to build decentralized applications, and so we ended up building things like a dApp store and a little accounting system, and from that emerged essentially infrastructure and developer tools, things like Truffle Suite and Infura and MetaMask and other pieces.
So now it seems like Consensus is focusing on financial services. Is it the case, and why Consensus does see financial services as a big opportunity for Ethereum-based systems?
So I think we have a significant focus on fintech and financial services, but I wouldn't say we focus on financial services. We do things like supply chain track and trace, and there's a significant financial component to that, like commodity trade finance, et cetera. But we build an Ethereum client. It's the third Ethereum client that we've built over the years. We built the first Java client, Roman Mandelay's project, and we built the first Haskell client. Now we're building another Java client. Infura is not financial services. MetaMask is not financial services. Truffle is not financial services. Yet we do work with financial institutions to help them onboard to the blockchain ecosystem, to help them build blockchain systems that they care about for their businesses. We have been heavily involved in digital assets and continue to be heavily involved in digital assets. And so whether that's Mata Capital, project organized by Consensus in France, or whether it's projects like Gnosis from way back, or new projects like Scale Network, we are heavily involved in digital assets, and Ethereum 2 staking soon, and other staking, another staking platform that we're releasing. So I guess the reason it feels like we're heavily into financial services is because there's a financial component in so much of what we do in society, and so much of what we do with our technology. The way I like to think of it is that we're building, so we probably spend 60% or more of our attention on public mainnet things, and we use that exact same technology in private permission systems, and we built some multi-million-dollar production systems for projects like Comgo, and another one, Covantis, that's going to be just as big. But all of that infrastructure, I guess our main focus is public mainnet and trying to bring the rest of the world in that direction, whether in layer 2 solutions that link into mainnet, or just on mainnet, whether it's Ethereum 1 or soon Ethereum 2. And so we think of that as building a foundation of trust for the planet, moving the planet from subjective trust to automated objective trust. And what that enables is the building of a new financial layer for the planet. So it's open decentralized finance, it's the money Legos, it's protocols essentially that will enable the world to re-architect all of its systems, and draw legacy businesses and enable new businesses to essentially build out the emerging decentralized economy.
So we recently seen the emergence of passive income on decentralized protocol. Is this something that Consensus is looking particularly at, or is it an opportunity, something you want to tackle at some point?
Sure. So I think passive income, as some people are calling it, is incredibly important for our ecosystem, for decentralized protocol, the decentralized protocol ecosystem. I expect it to be the most intensely active passive income ecosystem that we've ever experienced. I mean, this stuff is very raw. The technology is very immature. The people who are attracted to Ethereum right now are technologists, far-sighted entrepreneurs who are just building stuff either for each other or for the occasional end consumer or for enterprises or consortia. The people who are now attracted to this decentralized finance layer have been the technologists, again, building stuff for each other. But now we're starting to build stuff for financial nerds. And so in a world of low interest rates or negative interest rates, financial nerds are getting very interested in that and will get increasingly interested in that. And they're going to, entrepreneurs are going to start building things that are easy to use to enable less sophisticated potential users to have interest-bearing savings accounts. So things like that, whether they're built into existing systems and they make use of open decentralized finance on Ethereum, or whether new systems are built, that sort of yield is going to be incredibly compelling. And it's going to be very active. It's not going to be passive income anytime soon, I don't think. We may create some smart robo-advisors that move our money around between different protocols, yielding different yields, but it is still a pretty dangerous place to play. I wouldn't recommend a retiree put money into these systems. And it's going to be a place where effectively, I think it's going to be the first major, not killer application, or it is sort of, if you take all the different money Lego protocols and understand that you can wire them together, then that's probably going to be, that and or gaming is going to be the first killer app that draws lots of normal human beings to the platform. And when that happens, so David Hoffman, I think, was the first person that called Ether a permissionless collateral that enables the bandwidth of decentralized finance. And so as more and more value comes into the decentralized finance ecosystem, it's going to raise the value of that permissionless collateral token, which is going to increase the bandwidth for open decentralized finance. So the more money that comes onto this platform, the more activity and attention that drives, and the more bandwidth that creates, because essentially there will be more Ether collateral available to do more lending and to drive more liquidity through these protocols.
Right, so you mentioned boats, and I guess that's the way that the part where open source can really help on this, to make sure that everybody can benefit from being passively also involved with the protocol.
Or lose really badly.
But as you said also, the technology is still very raw, and transaction gets included 1 block at a time, with the orders being, the ordering of the transactions being decided by the validators. And we've seen some exploit of this kind of problems or of limitation recently. So since blockchain is bound by the block time limitation, how do you think we can bring the classic financial instruments, the legacy financial instruments, to the blockchain despite those limitations?
So I'm not sure I understand the question. Because validators can choose the sequencing of transactions, because there are things like flash loans that can sort of do a whole bunch of steps and either create economic value for somebody or not exist.
And the problem of doing order book management on the blockchain.
Yeah. So I agree that there are some serious dangers in these immature protocols, especially as they start to get wired together and interact with one another. And so I think we're going to see continued progress, but I think we're going to need to have very careful, prudent, maybe slow movement forward. As new features are introduced into a protocol, you're not any longer only impacted by your own protocol. It's no longer sufficient to take it to consensus diligence or some other smart contract auditing group and say, is this safe? Please validate this, because you are now embedded in a whole ecosystem, and the potential side effects are going to be interesting and in some cases dangerous. And so the DeFi protocols are going to have to get together, and maybe it's a case of creating smart agent simulators who are doing a bunch of things across a bunch of different protocols, and maybe we need to introduce time delays and other things, and not forever, but just so that we can harden these systems and make sure that we're not just introducing a whole bunch of pitfalls.
Yeah, so the formal proof or the formal proofing of the smart contract is not protecting anyone against the social behavior of the protocol itself, right? And I think we are all looking ahead to Ethereum 2, and I'm very impatient to see this happening, because it's going to bring proof of stake, and with proof of stake, we're going to have a sort of a yield.
Passive income for you?
Passive income on the Ether, which I see as a sort of an interest rate from kind of a central bank. And that interest rate, that director rate, would fuel all the decentralized applications, or all the decentralized finance application. I think it's a view that you share, or if you don't, tell us why, and
Sure.
What do you think Ethereum 2 is going to bring to DeFi?
What you're saying is you see staking as a risk-free rate, basically the base rate in a yield ecosystem.
Yeah, some new Ether that you can trade, convert, and so on.
Yeah, so I like that idea a lot. I think, so if you look at nation states and central banks and their treasury departments and how they issue bonds, because they can print as much money as they want, they can pretty much guarantee that they can pay off the bonds that they sell to financial institutions or to people. And so that's why it's called a risk-free rate. But it's not really risk-free, because nation states don't last forever. So I think what will be interesting is whether the risk-free rate in Japan or the EU or the United States, how that compares, because a system of laws is basically a set of protocols, and if an ecosystem like Ethereum and a protocol like Ethereum gets really, really big, global, incredibly well utilized, it'll be interesting to see if the risk-free rate of that protocol, of that set of rules, is more risk-free than the risk-free rate of nation states going forward. But absolutely, I think thinking of the base protocol, the permissionless collateral, as the related to the risk-free rate is a really interesting way to think about it.
So I would say it's a risk-free rate as long as you don't consider prices, and how prices can overreact.
Yeah, but it's still the rate.
Yeah.
It's still, it doesn't matter how that compares to some other token like the US dollar or a commodity like gold. You still get the same rate.
It will be interesting to see how the price of executing a particular operation on Ethereum will change with the emission of new Ether.
I'm sorry, the price of what?
The price of executing operations like transfer a token or transfer.
Sure. Yeah, so I feel like decentralized protocols are going to get very, very inexpensive to use. So right from the start of the Ethereum project, I think most of us thought, we didn't think like the Bitcoin core people that it should be really expensive to run a transaction. We thought that there would be so much activity on these networks and just so many ways to achieve scalability that running computations would get as cheap as air.
Yeah, and this, the fact that it's cheap also came out from standardization. The fact that we have now an ERC20 token that is multi-tested with different implementation and so on. So where does consensus stand on this movement of standardization? Do we need a better standard for security, better standard for oracles, better?
Yeah, we need standardization all over the place, whether it's de facto standardization. I think one of the main reasons that Ethereum got so popular was because we de facto standardized on ERC20s, making it easy for anybody to issue these tokens, making it easy for exchanges and wallets to deal with them, and for people who issue them to know that exchanges and wallets would deal with them. And so we need to see so much more of that, and we do through the EIP process. It's not a perfect process, but it's a pretty great process for achieving standardization. Certainly requires lots of debate and maybe more mature processes going forward. The Ethereum Foundation and the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance has engaged the Oasis group. It's a foundation similar to the Linux Foundation and the Apache Foundation to perhaps help out in formalizing those processes a little bit better. We at the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance have tried to put together an enterprise standard for Ethereum clients so that we have the base Ethereum clients that are subject to EIPs, but there are some things that are enterprise related, roles-based access control, things like that, that really don't belong there, and so need to standardize on those things. We put together a token taxonomy initiative. We're actually looking at something for the music industry.
Here we go with the reggae music.
Sorry? Yeah.
The reggae music is back.
Reggae music is back. Yeah, it's around tokenization and music. So we need and especially for interledger, so we're going to need to figure out ways that essentially messages and tokens can be fired across different ledgers, and transactions can be invoked on different ledgers, and messages passed with return values. And so, yeah, I mean, just you and I talking is all about standardization. The fact that we can even remotely understand each other.
Let there be money Legos. So what would you say to someone that would argue, well, those money Legos are cool, it's for kids playing in their room, but nobody would build a house out of those small bricks?
Nobody would build a house on toys. So I think money Legos is a really cute name for it. I think it was more about the fact that they can be attached to one another and that you can build more sophisticated structures from the different pieces than somebody trying to call it a useless kid's toy. But also, if you look at all the architects and engineers and computer scientists, for a long time, we all built with, when we were kids, we all started our careers building with Legos and Mindstorms and wood blocks and stuff like that. So I don't mind calling these things toys for now, but they're gonna become extremely sophisticated instruments. Essentially, the world has lots of financial protocols, and they're really crappy. The financial world consists of a lot of institutions that specialize in reconciliation of different databases. They also, when they get the reconciliation right, they provide financial services to lending and stuff to companies and to people. and all that reconciliation can basically go away. If you're on one shared ledger, one source of truth, there is no reconciliation. Clearing and settlement happens in the instant of the transaction. You don't have databases getting out of sync that need to be fixed. Or if you have two ledgers and you have a standard, then reconciliation happens in real time. So you're just doing that automatically. And so we're emerging from a world where the systems were pretty remarkable, but incredibly inefficient compared to what we can do now with replicated state machines.
So Legos definitely shaped our way of thinking about problems, of building problems. So it's not about reinventing the wheel, but actually inventing a wheel that roll properly. So we came
a rounder wheel, yes.
Yeah. So we were supposed to talk more about open source and the future of finance. I think that we can agree that open sourcing has been a tremendous help to better internet-based services. With open sources of code, you had a better battle testing, better standards, better improvement. And before you said that sophisticated finance people are going to start to look at this and start to play around with it, and eventually it will bring it to the masses. But do you see also the layman, the average developer getting into finance with Ethereum or with blockchain? Is there something that we can help here, or we can make it arrive, like meet me in the middle, like instead of just the finance people jumping on Ethereum, having more average developer jumping on finance thanks to this?
Sure, yeah, I think that's going to happen. So a long time ago, there weren't any programmers, and then programming languages, computers were developed, and there were some programmers. Along came the internet, which connected more academic people. That led to certainly exponential explosion of that space and the World Wide Web, or the Internet of Information. And suddenly we have a large percentage of the globe who are technologists, or even if they don't think of themselves as programmers, they're still doing things that are very technical, building websites, etc. You're not really a programmer necessarily if you're using certain tools to build websites, but the tools facilitate people moving into this information economy. And we're moving now from this information economy, which is based on TCP/IP and HTTP and HTML and SMTP, to an Internet of Value economy, which invents a new form of trust, and that's going to be based on different protocols. It imbues strings of digits with actual value, because we've invented something called digital scarcity. And so this becomes the new language, the new sort of base understanding of so many people in the economy. We're just on the precipice of that starting to happen, but essentially we have democratized access to the financial infrastructure. So the financial plumbing of the world used to be owned by and operated by the financial priests, people in the churches of the central banks, or in the churches of the major commercial and investment banks, and now your bank is in your pocket and you can totally program your bank. And so it's not quite there yet, but absolutely everybody's going to be able to operate the machine the way they want to.
Talking about ecumenism, you said before that Consensus started with building different clients. So I remember Ethereum J. I don't know what happened to Ethercamp, if you have news about this.
Wait, is Roman out there somewhere?
Yeah.
Where is Roman?
I don't know.
So you know that that the Ethereum J team recently just rejoined Consensus. So
Okay.
the Harmony team
Cool.
used to be Roman's team, but now they're helping build Ethereum too.
And you also mentioned Ethereum H, Ethereum Haskell, so building a client in a language that is formally provable and you can audit and so on. We read in the press that Consensus might absorb the team of Church of the Central Bank actor, JP Morgan, which has built a client on Get and a layer of Haskell. So it seems like the two dots are connecting. Would you like to share something about this?
So I can't share too much. So we have been working really closely with JP Morgan's Quorum team for quite a long time. They were one of the founders of the Ethereum Enterprise Ethereum Alliance with us and other groups, Accenture and Microsoft, et cetera. And so our teams have been working very closely together for quite a while and like each other and respect each other. So we built a client called Besu, which is an Ethereum client. It's a Java-based client. It's Apache 2. It connects, operates on mainnet, but it also has a confidentiality overlay called Orion that enables, mostly in private permissioned situations, but soon on public mainnet, enables confidential transactions to be done and essentially logged to the blockchain. So you can have this set of counterparties doing something that nobody can read. And so we use those in consortia networks and enterprise networks that we build. Quorum, built by JP Morgan, does the same thing. They built it on the Go client, Geth, and they built their own confidentiality transaction manager. So we have been, essentially, I believe the story is that JP Morgan wants to be a bank. They want to build lots of systems on blockchain. They actually started building blockchain systems at POC 5 of Ethereum, so like way back, more than 5 years ago. They've been really on top of this. Their CEO may not have been totally aware of what they were doing at the time, but there's a lot of people there that are building a lot of systems on blockchain. They're all building on Quorum, and they just they want people to use the Quorum technology. They want people to use their systems, but I think there's been some resistance amongst other financial institutions and just other kinds of institutions to make use of this technology that's effectively owned by a big bank. And so they decided that they wanted to externalize that project, and they've been looking at different groups. They've been talking to different groups about who would take on that project, and we are now in deep discussions with them.
Okay, so it seems like Consensus is poised to be the one that will bring the balance to the finance world.
So bring balance, I would say bring integration. The vision has always been to move the world from top-down command and control, centralized systems, subjective trust systems, to automated objective trust on massively decentralized protocols. It started out with enterprise needing to do its own thing in more circumscribed private systems. That's the way enterprise adopted the web technologies too. They just need to move slowly and get comfortable with respect to privacy and confidentiality and scalability. Tomorrow, March 4th, Consensus and two major global companies are going to announce a new protocol that enables organizations to interact with one another, share private information, interoperate with business processes, and do all of that with full confidentiality on mainnet. And so that's always been the vision, and maybe tomorrow will be an inflection point.
And you're announcing this at HCC? And you're announcing this at HCC?
It's actually being announced in New York City.
Okay, so hello New York, if you're listening. We're waiting for this to happen.
But we'll hear about it here.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Jerome.
Out of time.